This is a story about Peter Kaus, a German-American farmer patriarch, and how he crossed America, actually how we ended up here in the western United States. The story starts with political instability and struggles in Prussia, and the family decided to leave. They had to travel to inland port. They left the Frankfurt area and went to Bremen, and they caught a sailboat to America. They arrived in America in 1854, and Peter's father was able to purchase a farm up in Sheboygan County, Wisconsin, and so they traveled overland and then up Lake Michigan to Sheboygan, where Peter stayed until about 1880. He met Sophia there and married her, and they raised 7 children in Chilton, Wisconsin, before he finally left around 1880 for St. Bernard. St. Bernard, Nebraska was about 30 miles north of the Union Pacific Transcontinental Railroad, and it was kind of a boom town at some point. And I think they left there for a better life, but I'm not sure it panned out because they only stayed there 7 years before they finally moved on to Kansas. So they stayed 25 years in Wisconsin and only 7 in Nebraska, and then they moved to Kansas, where they stayed 20 years before they moved on to Idaho. So in Kansas, Peter and Sophia had 3 more children, including my grandmother Katie, the smallest child in this picture. They farmed there for 20 years. The girls married Trommeters and Weeses, and here's a shot of the township down in Selden, where William had 160 acres, and he stayed in Kansas. He didn't leave to move to Idaho, as did a couple of the other families. The Trommeters, I think, stayed there as well, and they actually had 460 acres, and the Weeses had 160 next to them. And then in the Prairie Dog Township, right next door, Peter had 160 acres. The Rock Island Railroad between Denver and Kansas City ran right through their field next door, and I'm sure they helped construct the giant church at Leoville a couple miles to the east. And we see these pictures that were taken just before they left for Idaho. I think they knew that they weren't all going to be together ever again. And I think Kansas was a tough place to live, and the next generation was coming along. Here's the Weiss and Trommeter children, and I think Peter was pretty insightful, and he decided that he was going to move on and see what was going on. He went up to Cottonwood, where his sister was married to Chris Schracker that had a place, and the Nez Perce Reservation was opening up for homesteading, and they acquired this place out at Westlake. This is a view east. You can kind of see the shadows on the left side, so that would be the north side. But this was southwest of Fernan and northwest of Cottonwood. They probably lived in the little cabin next to the house there before they built the big house. And that shed in the middle was probably the original barn, and I'm sure they built this up through a number of years. And this is probably the picture that they took before they sold the place, right at the end. And here they are with their buggy and their swather. And here's one of their granddaughters with some horses. And I think it was probably a pretty difficult life on many ways, but it was a good life. This was their final home that they had in Cottonwood when they moved into town. They only lived here for a few years before they passed on in the late 1920s. But I'm sure it was a comfortable place for him after so many years out on the farm. And here they are with one of their grandsons. But they had a great life. It was wrapped around their family and their religion and their land. So that's Peter Kaus's story.